what if you don't offer coverage to at least 98%? What if you decide, I'm just not going to do this at all, or I'm not doing it now and I have no intention of doing it in the future? There is a penalty for that. The payment is equal to the number of full-time employees you employed for the year minus 30 multiplied by 2,000. And remember, that's why it's so important to figure out if you've got the 50, because that's the number they're going to use. And they're going to be looking at those full-time employees, but that's the number that's going to be used to determine whether or not how much money you owe for the penalty. And the penalty is going to be paid by the month. It'll be 1/12 of $2,000 per employee. And the reason for that is you might have an employee that's only with you for 6 months. So you don't want to pay that for a whole year. You'd rather pay it by the month. The problem, I think, or what's going to be interesting and complicated is just the amount of work to keep up with that every month and to be filling out that form and to making sure you're paying it. And this amount does go to the government. Now, one thing I read from the IRS, and this is not something I've heard a lot of people talk about, but in 2014, the only way that you're going to have to pay this $2,000 if you don't offer coverage is if you have one of your employees that goes to an exchange and gets a subsidy. The minute they do that, that's going to trigger the IRS to contact you and say, do you or do you not offer insurance? Your employee's saying you don't, and you say, no, I don't. And so then at that point, they will send you the bill. After 2014, you will have some sort of a form that you will complete. I'm not sure how it's tied, if it's tied to the way forms you complete for quarterly taxes. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but after 2014, you will have to pay that penalty regardless of whether or not you have somebody who gets a subsidy. So that's 2014's kind of just the first year they're going to do it, and it's going to be based really on whether or not an employee goes to get a subsidy in an exchange. If you do offer coverage to at least 95% of full-time employees and dependents, there are no penalties at all unless the coverage is determined unaffordable, doesn't meet the minimal value, and the employee receives the premium subsidies through the exchange. So the way this works is you offer coverage and you've done your best to try to make it affordable, but maybe you just couldn't. Maybe you just weren't able to. And an employee goes to an exchange and qualifies for some sort of a premium subsidy, whether it's a tax credit or whether it's an actual, break in whatever their monthly rate is. Then at that point, again, you get a call from the IRS. They're going to ask you, what do you offer? And you will be asked to pay a fine of just $3,000 per person that gets a subsidy credit, okay? So that's not for every employee, that's just for the one that gets the subsidy. That's the only fine that you would have, and that is paid, again, that's another monthly payment that you would make to the government if that should happen. So these things are important to know because now this year you need to determine how many employees you have, and then looking forward you also need to determine, okay, for my lowest paid employee, is my coverage affordable or not? Would it be affordable according to these measurements today? If nothing changed, my premiums didn't change, would that happen? And that gives you a good idea of maybe what your risk might be coming up in 2014. Determining the number of total employees is something you definitely need to do. Determining the number of full-time benefit eligible employees you have. Things to do too is just staying informed. These are some websites I've recommended. The IRS obviously has a ton of stuff that you can look at, a lot of publications. Informed on Reformed is actually from Cigna. They do a very good job. You don't have to be a Cigna member. They do a very good job of explaining reform. Writing your congressman, sending comments to any of those arms of the government that are in charge of this.